The sun was falling slowly over the wide open land, painting the sky with soft orange and gold. A cool wind passed through the tall dry grass, and the sound of horses could be heard far away. Clara stood on the porch of the small log cabin she called home. She was only 19 years old, but her eyes already carried the quiet strength of someone who had grown up in the wild country. The cabin stood miles away from the nearest town. A rough wooden fence circled the place, and an old windmill creaked in the breeze. Inside, the room was warm but lonely. Clara had lived here all her life with her father. Her mother had passed away years ago when Clara was still a little girl. Since then, the house had felt empty, like a tune missing its last note. Every morning, Clara rose before the sun. She fed the chickens, fetched water from the well, and prepared breakfast for her father. Then she worked outside, fixing fences, chopping wood, or carrying feed for the horses. Life was hard, but she never complained. She was used to the rhythm of it. The silence, the sky, and the wind had become her closest friends. Still, there was something missing. Sometimes at night, after finishing all her work, Clara sat near the window and looked out at the stars. She imagined what life was like for other young women her age. Some of them lived in town, went to dances, and wore dresses made of soft cloth instead of rough farm skirts. Some had a hand to hold, someone to talk to at the end of a long day. Clara had no such company. She only had her thoughts in the quiet night. The world around her was full of men. Cowboys rode past their ranch on long cattle drives. Wagon trains rumbled through the dusty roads, bringing travelers from far places. In the evenings, she sometimes saw groups of men gathered at the town saloon when she went to buy supplies. They laughed, told stories, and sang songs. Life seemed bigger there, louder, warmer. But when Clara returned home, the silence of the cabin wrapped around her again. Her father was kind but tired. Years of work under the sun had bent his back and lined his face. He loved Clara deeply but didn't speak much. He believed a woman should be strong, like the land itself. He didn't understand the loneliness that slowly grew inside her. One cool spring evening, Clara sat outside the fence with her friend Mary. Mary lived a few miles away with her big family. She was married to a blacksmith and had 2 small children. She often visited Clara when she came to town for supplies. They were sitting on a log, looking at the fading sunset. Mary turned to her with a teasing smile. "You've been quiet lately," she said. "What's on your mind?" Clara looked down at her hands. They were rough from work, small cuts showing from the day's chores. "Nothing," she said softly at first, but Mary knew her well. "Come on, Clara, I can tell when you're carrying something heavy." Clara hesitated. Then she let out a small breath. "I'm tired," she finally said. Mary tilted her head. "Tired of what?" Clara's voice grew stronger, though still gentle. "Tired of living without a man." The words hung in the air. She hadn't said them out loud before. They felt bigger now, real. Mary didn't laugh. She just nodded slowly. "I understand," Mary replied. "It's not wrong to want someone beside you. Life out here isn't easy. It's better when you've got someone to share it with." Clara's eyes lifted toward the fading light. "I see men ride past every week. They laugh. They go somewhere. They have someone. I just want a life that isn't so quiet all the time. I want to sit at the table and talk. I want someone to help when winter comes. Someone to walk with when the sun goes down." Mary put a warm hand on her shoulder. "You've got a good heart, Clara. One day the right man will see it. This land is full of cowhands and ranchers. Someone out there is looking for a strong woman like you." Clara smiled, but it was a small, unsure smile. She didn't know how love or marriage came to people. In books, it happened like magic. But out here on the dry plains, nothing came easy. The days passed, and Clara's feeling didn't go away. In fact, it grew stronger. When she woke up to the empty sound of the wind, she felt it. When she walked to the barn alone, she felt it. When she cooked supper and set only 2 plates on the table, one for her father, one for herself, she felt it most. Spring turned to summer. The town became busier as more cattle drives passed through. The saloon filled with music and noise at night. Clara went to town with her father every Saturday for supplies. She wore her simple blue dress and brushed her long brown hair before leaving, though she told herself it didn't matter. She liked walking down the main street. Horses stood tied outside the stores and wagons rolled by. She liked hearing the chatter, people bargaining, children laughing, and boots crunching on the dusty ground. It was a kind of life she didn't have on the ranch. One Saturday, as she was leaving the general store with a sack of flour, she noticed a man standing near the hitching post. He wore a wide-brimmed hat, a clean shirt, and dusty boots. His horse was tall and strong. He wasn't laughing like the other men, but there was a quiet confidence about him. He looked like someone who worked hard but didn't brag about it. Their eyes met for a brief moment. Clara quickly looked away, feeling her cheeks warm. She wasn't used to such attention. Tom Harland, someone said nearby. That's the rancher from the North Valley. Owns a big spread out by the river. The name stayed with her. That night, Clara sat near the window again, looking at the stars. She thought about Tom Harland and the way he had stood, calm and steady. She didn't know him, but something about him felt familiar, like the land itself. Days later, she saw him again at the feed store. This time he nodded politely and she felt her heart skip a beat. She answered with a small nod of her own. For the first time in a long while, Clara felt something new. A quiet hope. She didn't tell her father or Mary about these small moments. They felt like secret seeds growing inside her. She wasn't sure where they would lead, but they made her days feel a little less empty. The ranch still required hard work. Every day she woke early, tied her hair back, and faced the chores with steady hands. But as she worked, she found herself smiling at times without knowing why. She thought about the warm evenings when the sky glowed pink, about what it might feel like to have someone ride beside her down the dusty road. She began to dream again, in a land where life was built from sweat and silence, where every sunrise meant another day of work. Clara was slowly discovering her own heart. She didn't have fancy dresses or city dances, but she had hope, simple, strong hope. And in the Wild West, hope was often the beginning of every great story. The wind carried her quiet words one evening as she stood near the fence, staring at the horizon. "I'm tired of living without a man," she whispered again. But this time it wasn't only a complaint. It was a promise to herself that she wouldn't let her life remain only wind and silence. What she didn't know was that her quiet wish was already setting something in motion. Someone had noticed her strength. Someone had watched the way she carried herself with calm grace. Life on the frontier was unpredictable, like the weather. And sometimes, the simplest whisper under the open sky could change everything. Summer settled over the valley like a warm blanket. The grass grew tall, the river ran clear, and the days stretched long and bright. Clara kept to her chores with the same steady rhythm, but her heart felt lighter than before. Every week or so, she crossed paths with Tom Harland in town. Sometimes it was at the feed store, sometimes by the blacksmith's, once outside the small church when people were leaving after Sunday service. He always greeted her with quiet respect, the way one nods to a neighbor who matters. Their words began simply. "Good morning," he would say. "Good morning," she would reply. Over time, those words turned into small talk about weather, water levels, and the price of hay. He never pushed, never spoke too fast, never tried to impress. He asked after her father's health and if she needed anything repaired at the cabin. He carried her feed sack without being asked. He tied her horse when the wind picked up so the reins wouldn't flap. Clara felt safe in those moments. She liked the way Tom stood with his shoulders easy and his eyes kind. She noticed how he listened when she spoke, as if her words deserved space. She noticed how his hands were strong but gentle when he handled a skittish colt. She noticed that even when town noises swelled around them, it felt quiet when he looked at her. One afternoon, Mary came by the cabin with her children and a basket of muffins. They sat at the porch while the little ones chased a grasshopper in the yard. Mary watched Clara with a smile that knew too much. "You've been smiling more, Clara," Mary said softly. "I guess I have," Clara answered, looking out at the soft roll of hills. "I think life is changing, though I can't say how yet." Mary squeezed her hand. "Let it change. You've earned some happiness." A few days later, Tom rode up to the cabin for the first time. He had asked in town if she needed help with her windmill, and Clara had said the wooden blades were starting to crack. As he dismounted, her father stepped out to greet him. Tom's hat came off at once, and he introduced himself with calm respect. The two men shook hands. Tom examined the windmill, climbed the wooden frame, and studied the weathered planks. He talked plainly about what needed fixing and how long it would take. Clara watched from below as he worked. His movements were sure and careful. He didn't waste steps. He didn't talk just to talk. When he came down, his shirt had a bit of dust, and the light on his face made his eyes look the color of deep river water. "I'll bring new boards tomorrow," he said. "The wind here can be strong." "Thank you," she replied. Over the next weeks, he returned with tools and lumber. He repaired the windmill, then checked the fence lines, then offered to mend a loose hinge on the barn door. He never stayed too long, never crossed a boundary, and yet every visit felt like the beginning of something steady and good. Her father noticed. "You seem to trust him," he said one evening at supper. Clara kept her eyes on her bowl for a moment. "I do," her father nodded. "He's a careful man. That counts for a lot in this country." Slowly, a simple habit formed. On Saturday evenings, after errands in town, Tom would ask if he could ride alongside Clara and her father for part of the way home. They would talk about the day's small things, the saddle that needed oil, the new foal on his ranch, the flower shipment that came late. One evening, as dusk turned the sky to soft lavender, her father suggested he ride ahead to check a fence, and he gave Clara a quick look as he went. She knew that look. It was permission, offered without words. She and Tom rode side by side. The silence between them felt peaceful, not empty. "I like the sound of your windmill," he said after a while. "Like a song that doesn't need a voice." She smiled. "It's been quiet around here for a long time. I don't mind the wind anymore. It's company." "I understand," he replied. Autumn came with gentle mornings and golden afternoons. The first frost painted lace on the water troughs. Clara found herself thinking of Tom when she lit the morning fire, when she carried wood, when she washed her hands at the end of the day. She thought of him not as a fantasy, but as a person who might walk beside her in the small, important moments that made a life. One Sunday after church, Tom asked if he might speak to her father. They stood under the cottonwood near the fence as Clara pretended to adjust her horse's bridle. She kept her eyes down and her ears open. Their voices didn't rise. They carried the same gentle tone men used when they discuss rain or seed. When they were done, her father stepped back, thoughtful but not troubled. That evening, her father cleared his throat at supper. "He asked if he could call on you proper," he said. "I told him I trust his judgment." Clara's heart fluttered, but her hands were steady. "Thank you," she said. After that, Tom visited on Sundays, bringing simple gifts from the ranch: a jar of fresh cream, a bundle of sage, a length of soft rope for her father's old horse. He and Clara walked a little, always in the open air, always within sight of the cabin. They spoke of ordinary things: how he planned the winter feed, how she rotated the garden beds, how the stars looked brighter after a cold wind. Each conversation added a small brick to a wall of trust that felt strong enough to stand through storms. In time, the town began to notice. People in small places keep gentle records of one another, and whispers travel faster than wagons. But the talk, while lively, was not unkind. Some folks nodded with approval. A few raised eyebrows, then lowered them again when they saw the quiet dignity between the two. Clara kept her head high and her pace steady. She had opened her heart carefully, and she was not ashamed of hope. One evening, as the sky glowed with the last light, Tom brought a carefully folded blanket he had made from thick wool. The edges were hemmed with neat stitches. "For the cold," he said as he placed it in her hands. She ran her fingers over the stitches. "You did this?" she asked, a little surprised. "I like work that takes patience," he replied. "It keeps my mind calm." She believed him. She also understood something else. This was a man who did not rush past the quiet tasks. He met life where it was, at the fence, in the barn, under a sky too big for complaints. She felt warmth spread through her, as steady and as real as the wool in her hands. As winter neared, Clara began to feel a new tenderness in her body. She was often tired in the evenings and felt a gentle heaviness in her steps. She found herself craving warm broth and long rest. She had not spoken to anyone about it yet. Not her father, not Mary, not even Tom. She wanted to be sure, but her heart already knew. One morning she went to town alone, asking to see the midwife who lived near the church. The midwife listened kindly, asked soft questions, and nodded with a knowing smile. "You will need good food, steady rest, and kind company," the midwife said as she placed a hand on Clara's arm. "You'll have to make wise choices." Clara walked out into the clear daylight, her head light and her spirit full. She did not feel worried. She felt careful. She felt protective. She felt the first shape of a new life cresting like sunrise beyond the hills. That afternoon, she rode slowly home and found Tom waiting by the fence, speaking to her father in low, even tones. When he saw her, he straightened at once. She dismounted, tied her horse, and stood before him. For a moment words did not come. Then she found them simple and clear. "I have news," she said. He searched her face, then softened. "All right," she met his eyes. "I'm going to have a child." The world did not tilt. The wind did not stop. The cottonwood leaves still chattered softly. But the air between them changed. Tom's expression was steady, thoughtful, and gentle. He looked toward her father, who met his gaze with a quiet, measuring calm. Then Tom turned back to Clara. "Thank you for telling me," he said. "I am here. I will stand with you." She let out a breath she didn't know she had been holding. There were many things to discuss, many choices to make, but something vital had already happened. He had stayed. He had answered with promise, not panic. In the days that followed, they spoke with care about the future. Tom offered what he had: a home that was warm, a ranch that could support a family, a heart ready to work. Clara brought what she had always had: courage, honesty, and a steady nature. Her father, after a long, quiet evening on the porch, gave his blessing in that simple way of his: a nod, a hand on her shoulder, a deeper breath that meant he trusted her path. They moved gently, choosing respect over speed. Tom built a small extra room onto his ranch house, the hammer blows measured, the boards cut true. He brought a rocking chair and placed it by the window that looked toward the river. Clara and Mary sewed tiny shirts and soft blankets on long afternoons while the kettle sang. The midwife visited to share plain advice about rest, food, and walks in the fresh air. The church ladies came by with jars of soup and smiles that grew wider each time they saw Clara's color good and her step sure. In town, the talk rose and faded like any other wind. Some said the world turns as it will, and you do your best by the ones you love. Others said she had chosen a brave path. Most simply nodded, because they had seen how Tom stood at her side without fuss, how he answered questions with calm, how he placed his hand lightly at the small of her back when the path was rocky. People learn a lot from small gestures.